Good morning, everyone. My name is John Hillier. I'm here representing the Commercial Education Trust, an organisation that most of you won't have heard of, but we'll try and illuminate a bit of that in a moment. My interest in all of this stems both from being, for most of my career, in manufacturing industry, working in what these days is called HR, but was called different things then, but also in learning development. But then also in the latter part of my career, running the National Council for Vocational Qualifications, which introduced NVQs and GNVQs to an unsuspecting nation. Let me start by saying thank you to education employers and to the Edge Foundation for giving us this platform and allowing us to display to you and discuss with you some very important research work. Also to our director, Claire Brooks, who's done all the hard work in preparing this session, but mainly to you. We're hoping to devote at least half of this session to you questioning and commenting on what we have to say. In that respect, we're trying not to follow the example of previous speakers, distinguished and illuminating though they were. Just a quick word about the Commercial Education Trust. This is our vision, expressed in the kind of terms that visions are usually expressed in. And we're clearly all about links between business, enterprise, and education. If I put it in a somewhat simpler way, just try and imagine a world where everyone believes that a legitimate aim of education is to prepare people for work. Not the only aim, but a legitimate aim. But most importantly, that people act on that belief. And that all the learning and assessment that takes place integrates that belief into what happens in education. That's really what we're about. As far as today is concerned, we're here to put on display an important piece of research work, which has its origins in another piece of research work we did, and I shudder to think it started 13 years ago, which was headed by Karen Evans, who is on the panel with us today. Karen, I have to say, I'm sure sparing her blushes, has had more influence on me than most of the people I've been married to. In the sense that she introduced me to the idea of recontextualization, which we'll discuss in some detail further on. But understanding that all the worries I'd had over the years about the difference between knowledge and skills, and also understanding that there was a lot more to it than just talking about being transferable, all comes back to understanding recontextualization. So our research, and there have been other pieces as well, is largely concerned with what's happening, how we know it works, and where we go next. We are particularly interested in evaluating research work and in testing out its applicability. So, let's get on with it. The panel today consists of Trisha Fettes, who carried out the research, putting skills to work, and we'll spend a very brief time outlining its main content. Karen Evans, who is Professor Emerita at what is now the UCL Institute of Education. Emerita, for those without the classical education, is Latin for unpaid, but has a distinguished research record in this field. And then two people who also participated in the research because it was based on a range of case studies drawn from organisations with whom we have worked. So Tom Ravenscroft and Karen Mellor, I have to look at that, Mellor-Park. I'm sorry, I'm calling you Karen as well. It shows what an effect she had on me. Jessica Mellor-Park, both had organisations that participated in the research and in their own way are making significant contributions to the development of commercial education as we define it. So first of all, then, let me turn to Karen to say a few words about the original research on which this current work was based.
Right, thank you. Yes, I'm just going to make a few comments, really. There's a very small starter before the main course. Because all through this presentation, you'll find references and footnotes. There's one on the title page to the original project that we carried out for the Commercial Education Trust with the generous support of the Commercial Education Trust all those years ago. And even with the Putting Skills to Work title of this presentation has its roots back in putting knowledge to work, which was the theme of the original study, which was, as I say, supported by the Commercial Education Trust and extended also through the Economic and Social Research Council. Our initial focus when we started on this putting knowledge to work research 13 years ago, I'd forgotten it was as long as that actually, I thought it was a decade. We started to, first of all, to look at how work-based learning could be brought more effectively into learning programs at the intermediate level, which were designed to support work entry and workforce development. And we were looking, talking about the last speaker, we were looking at the question of how you relate subject-based knowledge and work-based knowledge. And we looked across 5 or 6 occupational fields, working with partners in those fields from the glass industry to finance. And our aim was actually just to bring some fresh thinking, and I'm so glad it's had some influence on John as well as other people. Our aim was to bring fresh thinking that went beyond ideas about the packaging, transferring and delivering of skills, all of which are metaphors, by the way, towards what we felt were much more active notions of how knowledge and skills, and I saw skills as a subset of knowledge in this particular study, can be put to work, recontextualized and reworked. I mean, at the time, John said he hated this expression. He kept calling it the R word. He said, please stop using that word. Can't you find a better one? And I've changed it now to reworking or something for people who don't like it. But I just realized now you've been converted to it. So anyway, recontextualized and reworked. And focusing also on looking at the kind of practices that enable this putting of knowledge to work to happen. And in all of this, employer input has been an essential ingredient, both before and after work entry. Now, as researchers, we know that we always like it when approaches we've developed with our partners are picked up and used by other people. And although it's a long time ago that these original ideas were developed, since we published the work in 2009, people I regard as activists from other occupational fields have really worked with these ideas and have developed them in ways that I wouldn't have thought of, actually, in ways that work for them, in nursing, in creative industries, in legal services, for example. And we've always emphasized that the approaches themselves are there themselves to be recontextualized, reworked, and indeed taken over by those who can use them and make them work for them. So in the case of this project, I was really delighted to be invited to support, in a very small capacity, the work that's been done, because it comes full circle in a way, but it's a full circle in the sense of a spiral going up, I think. And I've been really impressed by the creativity of the team that's worked on this and the quality of the work, which I really commend to you to read the report in full after this session. And the work by Trisha and project partners, I think, have generated really, again, their own fresh 2018 ideas of how to, for example, how to forge learning partnerships between young people and those who can provide experiences that both challenge and support them. I won't say more about that because Trish is going to talk about it. But crucially, this has to involve employers and workplaces, and it has to involve intermediaries, people who can work across boundaries, the people in the original study that we called these kind of hybrid industry educators who facilitate learning and the putting of knowledge to work. And the right combination of support and a challenge is as important in the workplace environment after work entry as it is in the learning environments created by educational providers before work entry. And we have to look equally at those things. Last speaker again, I think, alluded to this. In the workplaces, employers, yes, they're not educational providers, but they're very interested in what their new entrants are going to become. They want their new entrants to become knowledgeable and skilled practitioners, don't they? And how are they doing that? So these are some of the key points of connection between the previous work and the new work. And over to Trish now to talk about the exciting new stuff.
Can you pass the clicker up? Okay, well, I conducted this study last year, and we used the framework developed by Karen Evans, David Garland, and other colleagues to really explore organisations, the ways that they were using to develop the skills of young people to help them make successful transitions from education into work. And the study included a literature review, the development of 7 case studies, and also discussions with a business advisory group, which comprised entrepreneurs and employers in small, medium, and large organisations from various sectors. In the slides, we've included notes that have references to what I'm talking about this morning. And in revisiting the literature, we were reminded really that there's been a long history of debating what skills are needed. There have been numerous lists of generic type skills deemed necessary to perform well at work. And these have had various labels, from common, core, key, essential, soft, transferable. And often they included other attributes other than skills, qualities such as resilience, self-competence, and self-motivation. It's been predicted that in future, the World Economic Forum suggests that there's going to be a growing demand for personal, people, creative, and problem-solving skills. That demand is likely to grow in future, and some of the literature suggests that individuals will also need what has been termed as career adaptability skill, an attitude of curiosity to explore self and the environment, and confidence to design their occupational future. For example, an ability to interpret occupational information, weigh up options and make decisions, adapt to change, recover from failure, and seize new opportunities. Although some have contested all the claims made for these skills, there have also been well-rehearsed arguments as to why they are important. For example, in the benefits of having greater flexibility in responding to changing demands in the labour market, and economic returns. But there's been a perpetual problem. Despite a stream of government initiatives and programmes that have sought to prepare young people for work, many employers still claim that young people are not work ready. Why is that? Of course, employers don't speak with one voice. Their demands vary. And there's a whole host of reasons why it may be difficult to find and retain young people with the attributes that employers require. It's acknowledged, for example, that applicants who struggle to articulate their skills and lack significant work experience, it can be hard for recruiters to actually identify potential. Young people might find it difficult to match their personal evaluations of job requirements against their capabilities, resulting in poor applications or early dropout. But part of the problem may be that employers are not tapping into a potential. They lack commitment to talent management, not helping new recruits settle into the workplace. Some recruitment practices may put young people at a disadvantage. For example, screen out those with potential by asking for qualifications or performance levels higher than the actual jobs require. They might use informal word-of-mouth methods, and that can disadvantage those young people without the necessary social networks. And of course, employer expectations of young people may be unrealistic. Jobs may be low paid. They may be unattractive job offers to the most capable young people. And we have found, and you will know, that there are many rich and motivating learning experiences supported by business in schools, colleges and universities to help prepare young people for work. But sometimes programmes can be one-off events at curriculum margins rather than part of a whole school approach that values skills alongside academic achievements. Not all young people have access to the best provision, especially quality work experience and careers information and guidance. Experiences of transition to work can be inconsistent and heavily dependent on where they live and socio-economic background. With the growing complexity and changing nature of labour markets, the potential churns between employment, full-time, part-time, temporary, freelance or other forms of work, self-employment, and quite often returns to education. Young people face transitions that are often prolonged and fractured. They have to learn how to recognise and act on opportunities to gain a continuous flow of work and income, quickly acquire situational understanding, to see how they can apply or learn new skills in moving between different workplaces. It's not simply a matter of skills transfer. In fact, the metaphor of transfer doesn't help because it's dogged by assumptions about gaps between abstract or general subject knowledge and the assumed nature of practice at work, and conveys a rather static notion of skills. That having been developed in one context, they can be applied virtually unchanged in another. We noted from the vocational literature that there is, in fact, a sort of move away from the idea of transfer, which can imply a one-time, one-directional transition, leading to questions about the correctness of the curriculum in preparing young people for the workplace, to considering how relations between both sides can be established, despite differences, focusing on productive interactions between learning partners to help individuals see connections across boundaries and make sense of the whole process. Karen and colleagues have argued that putting knowledge generated in one context to work in another involves a continuous transformative process with progressive development of capabilities supported by multifaceted partnerships. Individuals as self-regulating learners need to develop metacognitive strategies, have higher order thinking ability to know when and how to adapt the skills or when it is necessary to acquire new ones. And these challenges are applicable as much for adults involved in role and job changes as for those entering the labour market for the first time. How skills are taught and learnt is crucial, along with the quality and nature of the learning environment that comprises both the physical conditions, the spaces, and social contexts. Like learning in general, skills development is mediated by a complex dynamic between, for example, learner disposition, biography, and the situated context of the educational institution. Teachers are influenced by assumptions about what constitutes good learning experiences, but also, as we've heard earlier this morning, about the pressures resulting from accountability measures and the demands of the curriculum and qualification specifications. Institutional support and training for teachers are therefore vital to effective skills development. Now, skills can be mapped against the curriculum and qualifications content. Great, you can tick the boxes. But if learners are to own their skills, these need to be made explicit through, for example, skills conversations. They need to learn how to contextualise skills for themselves. And gradual release of responsibility from teacher to learner can be facilitated by providing a range of different activities in and beyond the classroom. And these need to be carefully structured to enable learners to practice the recontextualisation of skills in a supportive environment. As we all know, work is a complex whole of integrated capabilities requiring individuals to put it all together in practice, and skills need to be developed in combination. Employment engagement is central in bringing the world of work into the classroom with opportunities for business partners to provide authentic materials and problems and act as knowledge breakers in mediating links between the curriculum and work to illustrate the relevance of skills. And this is important for teachers as well as their pupils. Providing direct experiences of workplaces can reinforce the relevance of skills and how they can be recontextualised to suit new tasks, their problems and situations. And all these experiences are helped by the way in which learners identify themselves with work roles and activities, part of imagining their future in an economic community. The learner is a partner in the process, since the provision of opportunity is accompanied by an expectation of their active involvement in adopting an inquiring approach, using work tasks as test beds, seeing adults from the workplace as sources of information and advice, and recognising use of their skills and articulating their learning and development. But, and it's a big but actually, it's not only down to what happens in education while young people are actually in school, college or university. There are many examples of effective practice in companies, but in general we found that more attention needs to be paid to how workplaces can foster a culture in which skills are better recognised and utilised. There seems to be a growing interest in how skills can be better utilised in the workplace, how they can be effectively applied to maximise workplace and individual performance. However, according to Europe, skills utilisation policy seems to be relatively uncharted territory, not only in the UK, but other G20 countries. Approaches to skills utilisation are said by the OECD, an international labour organisation, to represent a new way of thinking about public policies, moving away from traditional supply side to focus on how better to work with employers to raise the quality of jobs at a local level and provide employees with more autonomy to create innovation in the workplace. Not forgetting the support needed by those who are self-employed, freelance, temporary, to develop the skills they need to manage their business and cope with the unpredictability of their work. And long-term mentoring has been found to be particularly effective in supporting those workers. So, in summary, the Scottish Government, with Chris Warhurst and Patricia Findlay and others, has pointed to the need for all young people to be both aware of the skills they possess and know how best to use them, together with what has been called expansive workplaces that enable people to effectively use their skills. In the UK, the industrial strategy, with its emphasis on local networks, collaboration and partnerships to drive success, perhaps offers a fresh opportunity to consider how skills can be developed for the future with better skills utilisation in mind. The OECD framework, policy framework, may be a way forward in that it focuses on three main areas. 1, building skills for work and life. 2, encouraging firms to invest in skills. And 3, ensuring skills are fully utilised through better activation and matching. Support is needed in education from an early stage to include work as part of the learning process, but also continue well into a young adult's early career, with individuals also being willing to go on learning, to develop skills over time in line with their evolving jobs and other opportunities for work. There is a need for coordinated approaches across training, employment, and economic development to create an environment in which utilising skills pays. Now, as many of you will know, much of what I've talked about is not new. But the big question remaining is how issues relating to inequality, to access the best provision, how those issues can be tackled. Both Tom and Jessica will illustrate from their own experiences how they approach skills development, and we'd be very interested in the research that you may be doing around skills utilisation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Tom Ravenscroft is Chief Executive of Enabling Enterprise, one of the contributors to the study.
Wonderful. It's great to be here today and really exciting for Enabling Enterprise to be a part of this research. Very briefly, as a context, we work to ensure that one day every child and young person builds a set of essential skills that they need to go and be successful. And that was something that I felt acutely as a teacher a decade ago, was looking around my classroom of 15 and 16-year-olds and seeing some fairly fundamental gaps between what was going on in my classroom and what I could see they would need in order to thrive in college or university or on an apprenticeship. And as a pretty naive new teacher, I couldn't help but ask the question of why nobody cared if I was going to build this set of skills with that group of students or not. And so everything we've done at Enabling Enterprise has been built off that idea of how do you make it possible for every child and young person to build this set of essential skills as a normal part, as an expected part of their education and their time in school. And we now work with children from as young as 3 years old right up to 18-year-olds, really making the development of those essential skills a core part of the curriculum. And we've grown our work now to work with about, this year, just over 105,000 children and young people across the country. But the big question that I wanted to focus on is, that Trisha has framed, is how do you actually build those skills? And it links, of course, to what Kevin was saying earlier as well, about what's the pedagogy that undermines how we build those skills. And I think it's particularly challenging, actually, in the context of these sorts of skills, whatever label you might want to put them on. We use essential skills, and we've also used other names in the past, so we're not terribly precious about that. But why these 8 skills? Well, hopefully intuitively they look very familiar, perhaps slightly worded differently to how they might have been elsewhere. Obviously we did a full review of what else was out there, but the other lens that we took to it was, can we make it practicable for students, including children as young as 3 or 4 years old, their parents, their teachers, employers they might engage with, other organisations they might engage with too, to actually understand in a consistent way what we mean. And so what you see is we've ended up with 4 pairs. So the pairs cover communication skills of listening and presenting, problem-solving creativity we put together, staying positive and aiming high being the 2 sides of self-management as we see it, and then leadership and teamwork being the 2 sides of interpersonal skills. So hopefully a set that seems very intuitive, but as I said, what we've tried to do is to turn that into something that all of the different stakeholders around a child or a young person can actually comprehend and to use. But I think what's more important than just the top level and what the names are, because we could debate that endlessly, is what we did was we realised that actually for most teachers they would never in their teacher training, whether initial teacher training at the outset of their time in a classroom or subsequently, have necessarily ever received any training at all about how they might go about building these skills with their students. And what we saw is actually what we need to do is not just present a list of things that would be good to have, but actually to really break them down into what the teachable, learnable, even accessible components of those skills were. So just to take one example of teamwork, we can see that for the younger students, it might be as simple as how to take it in turns. And actually, if you can if you can seize that and you can build that, then actually you can then build onto more complex concepts. So the idea of taking it in different taking turns or allocating roles within a team. And as you go through, and conflict resolution is obviously a key one, particularly my experience of working with 15 and 16-year-olds, you move right up to sort of being able to measure the effectiveness of the team. And so you can actually, for teachers, break it down from, rather than these just being nice things to have at the end of a time in school, actually what might we think is appropriate for a 4-year-old to be working on, or a 6-year-old, or an 8-year-old. And that's what we've been working on over the last 18 months with colleagues, both many colleagues in the room, so including people like Business and Community, Careers and Enterprise Company, ARC, Teach First, Career Ready, but also 60 other organisations and individuals, again, some in the room, really stress testing how you can break each of those 8 skills down into those chunks and try to get, and of course it's imperfect, but try to get a sense of what would be age and stage appropriate at different levels. And this together has given us what's now called the Skills Builder Framework, in which we officially launched a couple of months ago. And so that helps those working with young people, whether they're educators or employers or other skills building organisations, to make sense of that journey to building those skills. But the second part of it is, how do you then actually achieve that progress against the framework? And we've done a lot of work really, I suppose, in some ways applying some of the almost some mastery thinking of, what are the ways that you really make sure that you've taught a step, that you've secured a step, that you can ensure that it is available in different contexts and can be recontextualized in that way. But the way that we get schools to think about it is alongside 2 other core skills that they feel ultimately very comfortable teaching, which is literacy and numeracy, and really taking the principles that apply to those 2 areas and applying them to this wider set of essential skills. So that's, for example, why we start so early, because actually for 3 or 4-year-olds, you see the same differences in these essential skills as you do in their literacy and numeracy on their first day at school. Similarly, we keep going all the way through to when they're 18, and many organisations take it beyond when they're 18, because actually you need to have that continued process. We measure it, so we encourage schools to assess where students are. Now, that's not a hard measure, that's not an exam-based measure, but actually if you know which steps the students have secured and which ones they're working on, of course you can be much more targeted in terms of what you're actually doing to help students build those next skills. We have a principle focused tightly, which is about the explicit teaching of skills. So not just doing, as Kevin referred to, naive practice and presuming that if you do enough activities that use the skills, then they'll get better at the skills. But, for example, explicitly teaching the fact that in a team it might be useful to have 3 different allocated roles, a timekeeper, a notekeeper, and a facilitator, which you could do endless group activities and never actually secure that piece of knowledge. Or similarly, presentation, actually teaching some of the techniques to do that effectively. We keep practicing, so we encourage students to use those same skills in lots of different contexts and to bring them to life. And that's why it's so exciting now that the partnership behind the Skills Builder Framework is now 500 organisations strong and includes not just organisations working directly in schools, but others like London Symphony Orchestra or the National Literacy Trust, or many others who are seeing those same skills can be built and reinforced in lots of different contexts. And finally, bringing it to life. So that's the crucial element of that recontextualization, is that actually we want students to understand from early on that these are not just skills that they're learning in school because they're useful for school and life, albeit that they are, but actually they can see how they might start to transfer them in lots of different settings. And so we work with about 130 employers to make that so. And so what we've seen and what's been really exciting to see over the last 10 years as we've been working on this is that it's perfectly possible with focus and with rigour for every child in a class to develop and build their essential skills to a really high standard. And what we're increasingly seeing now is that actually that's possible across whole classes, across whole schools. And that's a tremendously exciting thing to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Jessica, who really is called Jessica, Mellor-Park is Chief Executive of Onsite, another organisation that participated in the study.
Thanks, John. It was our pleasure to participate in the study, and I'm here today to hopefully bring the words that are on the page in that study to life for you. Many of you probably won't know what Lendlease is. You might have heard of Bovis, which was our old name. But Lendlease builds, funds, manages properties and developments around the country, around the globe. So we built the Sydney Opera House. We are currently just across the river redeveloping Elephant and Castle. We're about halfway through that. You will be cursing us in 4 years' time when we start the development of Euston. But I think you'll all agree it's long overdue. But Lendlease's ambition is to create the best places. But in order to create the best places, you need the best people, and that's where Onsite comes in. We're Lendlease's not-for-profit arm. Our work serves to ensure that regeneration doesn't simply change the physical environment, but delivers on the opportunity to transform lives. Onsite was created 10 years ago with the simple aim of changing the lives of disadvantaged people living in the communities in which we work. The work done by the team has seen this aim delivered beyond expectation on a variety of projects around the UK. Sorry, I should have moved that on. There we go. This is not, however, without its challenges. The property sector is a sensitive barometer of global and regional economic cycles, which swing from the extremes of boom to bust. The very nature of construction is a temporary activity in both time and place. The structure of the UK construction sector is hugely fragmented with long and specialist supply chains. When Onsite was established in 2007, the Construction Industry Training Board estimated that 85,000 new entrants per year were needed. This need still stands. We haven't cracked it yet. But whilst experienced workers can enjoy picking and choosing their next job, the reality is very different for those who are furthest from the labour market. Much work in construction is on a self-employed basis, with short-term, site-specific contracts presenting a higher risk to an individual moving off benefits and putting many people off from considering a career in the sector. The socially excluded, such as the long-term unemployed, homeless, or those leaving prison, can see record numbers of tower cranes on their streets but have no access to these jobs, whilst at the same time the sector struggles to recruit. So this is what we do. It's quite easy to get somebody into a job. It's much harder to keep them there. Onsite prepares people for the long term from the moment they engage with us. Success lies in the balance we strike with the support provided to our employees as they make the transition from low pay or no pay into clear career routes, and the understanding that we have of the contractors with whom we work of their specific requirements. How do we do it? We secure jobs from contractors, and then we provide industry-relevant training to those socially excluded individuals who generally have low levels of existing skills before supporting them into sustainable jobs. The model includes a pre-employment program, followed by on-the-job training, providing a pathway into a specific trade. This employer-led model enables individuals to become fully skilled and employed in key trades, whilst also instilling the life skills needed for a sustainable career. We differ from other employability organisations in the fact that we directly employ candidates, providing a foot in the door to work and ongoing continuity of employment with one stable employer, regardless of project duration. On average, we employ about 30 people at any one time, all receiving personally tailored support from our staff, pre-employment, during their employment, and once they've moved on from us. Onsite employees are monitored, supported, and mentored to deal with any barriers to sustained employment. This combination ensures that people not only get jobs, but crucially keep and progress in them. We're working hard to tackle inequity in the industry. Whilst construction is trying to address diversity, statistics suggest it's failing. According to UCAT, women make up 11% of the construction workforce and just 1% of workers on site. In 2016, the DWP revealed that 11% of Britain's 30 million workforce are from an ethnic minority. In construction, this drops to 3%. By focusing recruitment and retention of staff on homogenous groups, employers are significantly reducing their talent pool and missing out on a huge proportion of the skilled workforce. When it comes to employing ex-offenders, the number of companies who will even entertain that idea are far lower. Ministry of Justice figures highlighted that just 27% of people entered employment on release from prison in 2015. Our approach to training, supporting and directly employing current and ex-offenders, amongst many others, has seen reoffending rates fall well below the national average and has contributed to the rehabilitation and reintegration of over 95% of the individuals we have supported. We pride ourselves on breaking down barriers. 70% of employees are from a BAME background, 21% are women, with 4% employed in muddy boots trades. 1/4 of our employees are ex-offenders with a reoffending or recall rate of just 4.5%. But we're always trying to learn. We're not trying to just repeat what we do endlessly. So with thanks to different pots of funding, we're able to go out and challenge ourselves. One of those challenges is looking at the retention of new entrants. So starting in September of 2018, we're going to be running 4 iterations of a new programme called the Breakfast Club for 12 participants per cohort over a 12-month period. The aim of this programme, developed in partnership with Lendlease's supply chain, is to reduce the number of new entrants who drop out of the industry in their first year of employment. The project aims for employees to feel invested in and supported, hence the need for some of the sessions, in fact most of the sessions, to not be directly related to construction. We'd initially proposed that the training would comprise both practical, skills-based elements alongside coaching, mental health and well-being support. However, when we had the discussions with the contractors, a clear and consistent theme emerged that the biggest issue that the contractors had with their new entrants was communication. We explored this in more depth with anecdotal evidence showing that whilst there may be multiple reasons for a worker leaving their job, there would be just as many reasons that the job and the worker could be saved if there were improved communication between worker and supervisor. But even there, further themes became apparent. Contractors were losing, both firing and receiving resignations, people because they were bored, because of financial pressures, because of anger management issues. This project aims to tackle those issues head on, and we've got various control groups running with this. So at the end of the year, we'll be able to have some good statistics to show whether it has actually had a benefit. And many of the elements that we're introducing in this bespoke training actually speak, I think, quite closely to Tom's skills points that he was talking about earlier. I think it's very easy to denigrate and dismiss those who work in construction, but we need good people to make the architect's vision a reality. Construction can offer hundreds of different careers, and that's the key point. If you start at the bottom of the industry, it's relatively easy to make real rapid progress, and for today's younger generation, immediacy matters, as does money. Construction can offer a balance between head, heart and hand. The head learns the skill, the hand delivers the skill, and the heart works as part of a team to deliver on the architect's original vision. Surely this is a balance that we should all strive for. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.